Hi, I'm Mark, and welcome back to On the Timeline. It's a show where we break down the editing of our recent short films. And this episode, we're breaking down our recent horror short film, Redacted. And if you haven't checked it out yet, you should probably go do so before watching this video, because there's going to be big spoilers ahead. Alright, let's get on the timeline. So here we are on the timeline, and just a note here, I was the offline editor for Redacted and Yaku was the online editor, meaning that I laid down the general shape of things, general sort of pace of things, and then Yaku went in and really refined that pacing and tweaked and changed shots here and there. It was really a good collaborative effort, and I really recommend actually working with an online editor or with an offline editor and really establish that good collaboration, because your edit is only going to be better for it when you have as many eyeballs on it as possible. What is really important with sort of a genre piece like horror is establishment, and especially in a film like this that has a lot of sort of recurring elements and the whole film is sort of cyclical, and this sort of the past and the present speaking to one another, is there was a lot of attention paid to how long we hold on shots for in the beginning so that it doesn't sort of feel contrived, and we're sort of doing subtle clue giving to the audience as to what is going to happen and what will repeat later on. So for example, what was actually funny was a lot of conversation about how long to leave this foot shot on, because obviously we come back to it later on and then there's the first scare where her foot gets grabbed. So it may seem sort of inconsequential, but in the context of the scene, when you're sort of setting up a scare or setting up an element in the film, you don't want to make it seem like it's sort of there on purpose. It really was a fine balance of making it sort of seem natural, but also seem, like something foreboding was going to happen. It's all about that anticipation in the context of the scene, in the context of the whole film, and in the context of the theme and the sort of driving force of the narrative.
Hello?
So for that first scare there, it really reflects sort of the way drama works and the way comedy works, is that kind of like rule of threes. You have that first act, second act, third act. You have one shot of the foot, then you have another shot of the foot, and then you have, the payoff where the actual scare happens. You really want to think about sort of using a sort of structure like that. 2 shots, it felt too intentional and sort of contrived. 3 shots really leads into the sort of intrigue of like what is going to happen, but it also sort of lends the audience a sort of sense of complacency, because we see the shot of the foot for the second time and nothing happens, and it's kind of like, oh, okay, we're just, seeing this shot again. But then, in the third time when something does happen, that's when the scare happens. And just a note here about this actual scare itself is that we cut out space between the hand on the wall and when it grabs, just to create that jump, and it's sort of almost like an unnatural movement. Anything that people find sort of, unnatural or supernatural is scary. Something's there. Cut to the next shot, it's not there. So right there's the trick, right? That's like the editing trick, It's a good way to, use an edit to your advantage, to tell a story visually. Something's there, and through a cut, it's not there.
Escape from what?
So with a shot like this that jumps to the other side of the line, it obviously still works within that like horror convention. It's a very jarring moment, so it makes sense to break that 180-degree line. Obviously, we aren't still pulled out of the sort of geography of the scene because we know that she's like sort of landing on the floor, so the next shot will be on the floor. So there is that sort of logical sort of continuity there, but then sort of we break the 180 for that tensional horror effect. And here we have the visual effect, the sort of hidden visual effect. Obviously the light is not on this VFX shot, but I just wanted to use it as an example to show about how to sort of in the workflow, how to work with VFX shots. So you kind of want to create another track for different layers, would be different versions. So it's just so that you don't replace that footage with that VFX shot and then sort of it changes later. Think about using your tools in your editing software for things like versioning to keep things as efficient as possible. And this scene is only 1, 2, 3, 4 shots. A really good approach when you're thinking about editing in the pre-production and production phase, or even in the writing phase, is you don't want to overshoot things. You don't want to just sort of have coverage for coverage's sake. Yaku covered it in a very effective and efficient way by only having 4 shots for the entire scene, but you can just see how much you can get out of just those 4 shots, just by having this sort of wider shot versus the sort of closer up shot. Even that you can load with so much in terms of when you cut to this more profile shot and when you cut to this close-up. Perhaps to have a more efficient edit, start sort of really thinking about the sort of minutiae. We kind of get stuck in this sort of headspace of, oh, we don't have coverage of every single thing. We don't have like a million different shots. It's all about having the most well-intentioned shots. And from those well-intentioned shots, you can have the most effective edit, because you'll be surprised by how much sort of meaning you can imbue in the minutiae of the editing within those well-intentioned shots and between those well-intentioned shots.
Is it over?
Run! And in this scene here, what I was saying earlier, and sort of what will obviously recur throughout this film, because it is so much about sort of what is set up and what is paid off, and because it recurs, is you don't only think about sort of the first act being the stuff where you sort of set stuff up, and then when we see how it has changed later on, or might be sort of recontextualized. In this case, when we see the sort of super context of what's going on, it recontextualizes all these other shots. You always want to be thinking about in every single moment is, what is this setting up? Even if it's in Act 2, and where are the shots going to be later.
Hello?
And you can see that the way that music comes in, just as Elle is finding out more about the sort of whole context of the situation, as the audience is as well. When there is that sort of connection between the sort of audience comprehension and the character finding out that information at the same time, and with that sort of added musical sort of undercurrent that's sort of playing very nicely into that whole equation, it really aids in our sort of empathetic sort of connection and intellectual connection to the overall narrative.
There's someone in the house. You have to get out. Hello? Watch out, baby, they're from the iPad.
Another note here about cutting back to the shots here is that in the script, it actually doesn't cut back, because on the page, as you're reading it, it's kind of like, oh, we get it. The sort of the written word is very different to when you're watching visuals. So you really want to think in the edit phase, is something playing the most effectively it can. The first way I cut this scene is that it does more of sort of an auditory thing, but obviously the visuals with the audio cues about what's being redacted and what isn't really sort of paid it off more than if we were to just stay in the abyss and not cut back.
Just get out of there. Don't go to the bathroom.
So this montage here, Yaku had a very good point of when we wrote the script and he obviously was translating it sort of into images, he obviously didn't just want sort of various angles on L and then various angles on the different cue cards, and then we sort of fade between them in a sort of montagey fashion. The film is cyclical, so the shots are revolving. That sort of editing was basically done on set and pre-production, but in terms of how the shots were designed to be cut in this specific way.
Run! Run! Is it over? Or what? Behind you!
So really this climax scene is a payoff of everything that we've been setting up earlier. We see the interaction of the sort of dark space and where she just got captured. And as I said earlier, on the page, this was just entirely just set in the abyss and it didn't cut back. The only time it cut back is that when it said behind you and then we cut to this shot here. But in the edit, we really felt that we had to be juggling these two concurrent events to show how one influences the other sort of spatially and temporally. In terms of how it drives her actions and the sort of resolutive action of being able to get the jump on the man who is about to capture her. And then obviously we have that final payoff of those last two shots where she writes a chance instead of no use. We're seeing the shot right at the beginning of the film and we see it at the end of the film. A really nice thing that Yaku and Tapang did when they shot this is they knew that this shot was going to be used at the end of the film and at the beginning of the film, but this was going to be the moment where the phone sort of rings again and we end on this like cliffhanger. Is this shot is slightly wider than this shot here. You can see that this shot is slightly tighter than this shot here because there is that release, there is that change, something is different, so that when the phone rings again, it sort of hits that much harder. It's sort of like, oh, we've got this change, she has sort of developed throughout this narrative, and then when the phone rings again, it sort of hits that much harder and makes us sort of wonder that much more. So that's it for this episode of On the Timeline. I hope you learned something. If you did, then make sure to leave this video a like. And if you have any comments or questions for us, then leave them down in the comment box below. We try and respond to all of them. And if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, then consider doing so. It's free. We put out new videos on the channel every Tuesday and Friday, with a new short film on the first Friday of every month. So until next time, go out there, stay safe, and make your movie.